Welcome to the Social Engineer Podcast, the Human Element Series. This is episode 206. I can't believe we broke that 200 mark. I'm Chris Hadnagy, CEO and founder of Social-Engineer LLC, socialengineer.org, the Innocent Lives Foundation, as well as the Institute for Social Engineering. And I've been hosting this podcast since way back in 2009 when we did podcast uphills both ways. If you're looking for any type of social engineering, you definitely want to check out our new website, social-engineer.com. We are the experts in adversarial simulation when it comes to the human element. My team and I, we have spent our whole careers trying to understand how humans make decisions, what can alter those decisions, and how influence, persuasion, even manipulation plays a part in that. And then we use that to help test and audit your people so we can make them more secure. So check out social-engineer.com for anything to do with phishing, smishing, or any other type of SE vector you have there. And of course, the training is all on the website now. We have a number of classes coming up, so feel free to check those out there. And that is our sponsor for this show, Social Engineer LLC. Okay, a few other quick announcements. If you really love the topic of social engineering, you just want to talk about it, you want to be with other enthusiasts, you definitely want to check out our Slack channel. Well over 1,000 people in there now every day talking about pretexting, phishing, vishing, the psychology behind it. We have a job board. Just today, there was a few jobs posted on the job board, so you can check that out. We've had 8 or 9 people find new employment because of the site there, the Slack channel there. So jump on in. It's a family-friendly chat. We'd love to have you be a part of that. And I'd like to take a time to invite every one of our listeners to check out the Innocent Lives Foundation. You can find that at innocentlivesfoundation.org. My team and all of us over there, we're dedicated to the mission, and even our guest today is a part of our group over there at ILF. We are all dedicated to the mission to helping law enforcement uncover and trace down people who anonymously tried to hide on the internet while trafficking children or creating child abuse material. For 5 years now, over 5 years, my team has dedicated all of their time to doing that work. And it's amazing. We just toppled over 477 cases that we're working with law enforcement around the globe and identifying child predators and bringing them to justice. We're not a vigilante group, but you can find out a lot about us and how to support us. We're a 501c3, so we can use voluntary donations. You can check that out on innocentlivesfoundation.org, or you can volunteer your time if you have the skill and desire to join our team there. Of course, our last announcement, tied to the ILF and a close tie to my heart closely, is our intro and outro music is donated to us by the one and only band Clutch. If you're not a fan of theirs, shame on you. You should be. Go check them out at pro-rock.com. Amazing band. They've been around for 30 years now, giving us the best rock and roll in history that we can ever have. So go check them out. You love the music and the podcast, so give them some love too, as Neil is on the board of the ILF. Okay, let's talk about our guest today. Guest Alex Price. Now, he has an interesting nickname, SkipGuru. We're going to find out about that in a little bit. But he's a nationally recognized expert on the art of skip tracing. What is that? We're going to find that out too. 35 years experience in this very thing that we're going to learn about. FinTech and Bail Bonds industries, keynote speaker. He's done it all. And he's been part of the Skiptracer's National Certification Program, the Florida Public Records Guide, and the Military Installations Guide. He's been a contributor for several industry magazines, and both pre and post-pandemic became a popular content expert and podcast guest. And we have to say pre and post because things have changed in the last few years of how we can spread our expertise. Currently, he's a director of training and development for LocateSmarter, interesting company. We'll talk about that too. He's become a highly sought-after speaker in the bail enforcement, private investigators, and fintech space. He combines old school skip tracing methods with new age cyber tracking technology, which is a really interesting blend, which is why I think all of you listening will find our conversation super fascinating. He balances the hard facts about skips with just about the right amount of humor and a touch of Southern charm, which you're going to hear that really shortly. Special achievements would include being the first and only tracer ever admitted as a member to the American Recovery Association and Time Finance Adjusters, the TFA. His single most important job is that of a father, husband, and his work with the ILF, which, as I told you, we love him for that. And he resides in Mobile, Alabama with his wife and 2 kids. Alex, not only thank you for being my friend for so many years, but thanks for coming on the show finally.
Oh, it is definitely my pleasure. I've been overly excited for this, but I will say it's also a little unnerving because this doing a podcast with you and talking about a lot of this stuff is kind of like Luke Skywalker explaining a lightsaber to Obi-Wan.
I don't think so, but thank you for the compliment. Well, let's start off with the basic, because I think a lot of people, me included, way back, I think when I met you, I'd known about skip tracing, but it's not really clear what it is. So let's start off just at the basics. What is skip tracing, and how did you even get involved in it?
Skip tracing is simply finding or hunting humans, as I like to say, for a number of different reasons. And skip tracing at its basic level, if you've ever been on a high school reunion committee and had to find somebody, well, that was a form of skip tracing. It just had different levels of difficulty, and there's not a industry out there that doesn't do some form of skip tracing. The only thing that changes from industry to industry, from insurance to law enforcement to FinTech to even social engineering, the only thing that changes is the end result in mind. And I can go back to which led to our meeting and becoming friends and working together on projects. I read a book by Kevin Mitnick called Ghost in the Wires, which was just a real fun walk down memory lane for a lot of us that used to do the dumpster diving and other things back then. And Amazon, with its different algorithms, started suggesting books. And the second book that I bought was your first one. And it was talking about social engineering. And it was like, well, that's the same thing as a skip tracer, which led to you and I meeting on LinkedIn and then in person and developing a friendship, and me being an ambassador for the ILF. So that's really all skip tracing is finding people. And for me, I've spent 38 years doing it, primarily looking for fugitives and on the asset recovery side in an insurance world.
So when you're talking about insurance, why would an insurance company want a skip tracer? Like they owe money and they just disappeared?
No, a lot of times it's finding witnesses that maybe don't want to be found to different things, or a number of different issues from the insurance side with the SIU guys, the special investigative units at each insurance company.
So you said 38 years. Now we're going back. That's in the 80s now. So we didn't have Google in the 80s. We didn't have, easy internet that you can just pull up and start searching. I want to find Chris Hadnaggy. Where is his guy? So how were you doing skip tracing back in 38 years ago, before we had really the technology that we have today?
Ironically, a lot of it hasn't changed. Data has definitely helped, but the same data sources were available back then that there are today. What technology has done is it has sped up the process. I can gather more info on somebody with a click of a mouse than I could have in a month. But back when I first started, we didn't have a computer at the bank. If I needed something at the courthouse, I had to get in my car, drive there, use a microfiche, pay a penny a page, drive back, and then, digest the info. If it was outside of my area, I'd have to make a friend that would do the same thing and snail mail the info to me or read it over the phone. So very, very few things have been invented new in the information world. The only thing that's been done is the process in public record data, OSNA, et cetera, has been accelerated to a click of a mouse. I like to say we live in the information world, but better than that, we can have it now.
Yeah, that is for sure true. So let's talk about your nickname, because I said in the intro we were going to get into that. SkipGuru. Where did you come up with that, or who came up with that for you? How did you get that name?
No good nickname works if you made it up yourself.
I'm with you.
And I've been a major professional wrestling fan my entire life. And all those guys, all their gimmicks, as they call it, they don't create them themselves. Someone comes up with it, and they're basically an accentuation of who they really are in real life. But with that said, there was a platform years ago that was a platform, a CRM, that the buy here, pay here industry and the subprime market in the auto finance world used as their main CRM to run their businesses off of. And every year they had a users conference in Fort Worth, Texas at the Worthington Hotel there in the Stockyards. And I was asked to speak at it. And the gentleman that introduced me was an English gentleman. And when he did the introduction, he said, "I'm very happy. I try to bring the best speakers in, and I'm really excited about this next chap. He is the Skip Guru," because apparently guru is a word that's used over there. No different in martial arts. It's sensei or sifu. So he said, "We have the Skip Guru." It wasn't until several years later I was starting a blog and trying to come up with a name for it that was simple, that would be people would remember. And my wife said, "Why don't you use what that guy called you that time?" And I was like, "Skip Guru?" She said, "Yeah, one word, skipguru.com, you're done."
Uh-huh.
And that's where it started. And it's interesting and funny at the same time. My name is Alex Price, but I can't tell you how many people call me and they'll say, "Hey, Skip."
Yeah, I didn't even know your last name was Price when we first met, probably for the first year or so. I actually thought I thought Skip was part of your name, and that was just kind of like a play on words, right? It's always just Alex, and then Skip.
You are not alone in people that just say, "Hey, Skip."
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when you have a nickname for that long, it becomes part of like your identity. It's almost like a pseudonym, right? When people, I'm the same way. I've used Logan so long in the hacker community that sometimes at conferences, people don't even know my name is Chris. They call me Logan, and I answer to that. It's just a weird thing.
The whole Skip Guru thing, when he first called it or said it out loud, was probably a good 18 plus years ago. And then with the blog and social media, it's just become a brand. And it's very similar to the hat. If I don't wear the hat, people don't know me.
You're like, "Who are you? Did I meet you before?"
Exactly. I literally remember the first human hacking conference. And I get bored in hotel rooms. So I was downstairs at like 5, sitting on a bench. You walked by and I said, "Hey, Chris." And you said, "I know who you are. That's the hat." And so I have to wear it everywhere.
Yeah. Your identity. That's like a superhero. You take the hat off and the people are like, "Who are you?" You're like Clark Kent and Superman.
And I don't know if people can see over my right shoulder, there's a tree stand with about 7 different Stetsons.
Yeah. So. Okay, let's talk about skips. You mentioned to me before that there are 3 different types of skips. So what are those 3 different types?
Okay. These are some of my own personal theories that I teach, and through trial and error, I've come up with some theories on skip tracing that helps people be more effective with time management, also more cost effective. So over 38 years, I've been able to take any file and just by reading the notes and looking at without doing one search, without doing one phone call, anything, look at the file and I found different characteristics in people where I could drop them in one of 3 buckets, if you will, that tells me the type of skip they are. And then that gives me just a general direction to take the file so I'm not wasting time and resources. So people have different characteristics. So the 3 types of skips, the first is an out-of-pocket. It's the most common. It's someone who has left the area for what in their mind is a valid reason, maybe a new job, a separation. When you think about any of these skips, except for the third one, all of them have experienced what I call a speed bump in life, and they're never positive, and that's caused them to relocate. Now, the out-of-pocket is the cat that has good intentions. They've used all available resources, meaning money, for that relocation. They plan on taking care of their obligations. They plan on showing up for court, whatever. And it's that speed bump that causes them the fight or flight action. Mm-hmm. They're not really flight. Once they get settled, they plan on taking care of it. So that's number one. And that's probably 35% of all skips. The next one's an intentional. They've probably been a skip with somebody before. They know what they're doing. They're hiding. But oddly enough, what I've learned is they're usually hiding from something that's far more scarier to them than who it is that's hired me to find the person. Like, it is amazing how many fugitives over the years I've found that once they were in custody, they were relieved. Because whatever they were hiding from, whether it was child support or they owed somebody scarier than the bondsman and the court money, whatever, that's the part that they're truly running from. And then the third and final, and it was my personal favorite to look for over the years, is the fraud.
Why is that a personal favorite?
Because when you look at an application of any fraud, 99.9% of the application is, of course, erroneous information. It is almost impossible, especially years ago, to completely have everything on the app fraudulent, because something has to be verifiable for the loan to go out, the insurance to be put, whatever. So the trick to working a fraud is to take the application and the notes and strip it down till you find that one piece of information that is valid, and then build your file outwardly around it. So let's say the phone number was good the day the loan was made. Well, there's databases you can take a phone number and go back to the 90s of who it went to. Now I know who it went to, and maybe a different address. I can see who owns that property, who else has been associated with, and again, build the file outwardly around that. So it was the puzzle aspect of it.
Provided the most challenge, huh? So you like that.
That I used to have the most fun with.
Yeah. So what percentage of out of the threes? You said the first one was 35. So what percentage is the fraud?
I'd say if you take the next largest would be the intentional, and I do more writing and teaching now than actively skip tracing. But I'd say the fraud is, especially in the FinTech world, is a lot less than people might think. In the credit card world, it's a little higher, but that's a non-secured debt, so not a lot of money is spent on finding those people. So in the collateralized world or the bail world, I'd say it's less than 10% anymore.
So have you seen that number go up, like over the 30 plus years you've been doing this, the fraud number? Is there a significant increase in the amount of that over the last, let's say, even 2 to 5 years?
On the insurance side, yes, workman's comp fraud has skyrocketed.
Interesting.
In the FinTech world, it's pretty static. In your credit card world and some other spaces, it has spiked because it's so easy now to create sock puppets and other things that will make the most erroneous thing look as real can be.
And in your training, you talk about this thing that you call the magic 3. What maybe you can tell us a little bit about that. What is the magic 3?
Okay, if you think about it, every human on the planet has an inner circle of people that they talk to, they hang out with, family, friends, coworkers, so forth. Now, you have an inner circle in your personal life, you have an inner circle in your professional life, and sometimes those blend and sometimes they don't. With that being said, too many people spend way too much time worrying about the real estate magic bullet, location, 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 that they're chasing their tails because of that speed bump that I talked about earlier. The references that somebody may have that are telling you they haven't talked to the person in 6 months or a year, and most people think because they're jaded from this industry, they're being dishonest. More often than not, it's true because the speed bump caused a bridge to be burnt with that person. Maybe it's a divorce, and one of the references is friends with the wife, not the husband, and I'm looking for the husband. So when you think about the magic three, skip tracing is talking to as many people as you can until you come across one of these magic three. And all of us have one or all of them in our inner circle. But as we go down the path of life, think about this for a second. As we go down the paths of our lives, our inner circles change. We lose contact with friends. We make new friends. You can't tell me you're friends with every single person you were in high school, your last job. No. Nobody can. No. So that's why people on an application for insurance, club memberships, school, those references change. Mm-hmm. So I look for the people that are the satellite around my individual first, because they're the ones that are going to know the reason that caused the skip to begin with. Once I find out the why, that leads me to new people in their inner circle. And I've kind of given each one of them a name as well. The first is called the clueless, and they're the ones that you have not told that you're having marital problems, financial problems, et cetera, right? Then the next one, and they're more apt to talk to somebody like you or I about any number of issues. They don't know not to. The next one is the gossip, the chatty Cathy's, talking Teds of the world. They're the ones that know and just can't help themselves. Most of the time they're the extroverts, not the introverts or ambiverts of the world. And then the last is the frenemy that they feel slighted, and it could be perceived or something totally factual, but they can't wait to talk about Chris. They just need a reason. Mm-hmm. So that's who I look for, because they tell me the why and can drill me down to at least a closer geographic area the person may be to. Mm. They also give me the most important thing that people in my world, especially this younger generation that is so OSNT obsessed, they forget the two most important things in doing this or social engineering or pen testing or anything. There's two critical things you got to find out. The first is the who. I got to know who someone is before I can find them. Do you have a nickname? Do you have a hobby? Hobbies define who we are. So I have to find out who the person is, because when someone skips, they don't become a unicorn or a leprechaun. They're the same person they've always been. They're doing the same thing they've always done. They're just doing it in a new location. Yeah. So that's the magic three. And then you can do a bonus of coworkers. But that's one thing COVID has changed from pre to post pandemic. Yeah. Before COVID, we spent more time with our coworkers than we did our own family. So they knew habits and likes and dislikes of us away from the house.
That's an interesting point.
That our family might not have. Mm-hmm. Now, with so many people still working remotely, there's not that daily human reaction in the office space as there used to be. And you can't get that from chest up on a Zoom or a Teams call like you do in person.
That's an interesting point. You think about during pandemic, I actually hired a guy, and I didn't meet him for almost a full year in person. So I only knew him as like a 2x2 square. And I didn't really know his likes, his dislikes, anything really about him. So when I finally met him, I was like, oh, wow, he's really cool. I'm glad we hired him, but I had no clue for the whole time.
Just 2 weeks ago, I went to Cedar Falls, Iowa, where I met everybody there at LocateSmarter. And I've been working with him for 2 years now, and none of us have ever pressed palms, had a meal together or anything because of the pandemic. And, Zoom has changed quite a bit. I do a lot of webinars now.
Yep.
Prior to the pandemic, for over a decade, I literally spent over 200 days a year on the road.
Yeah.
Doing lunch and learns, on-site trainings. And this year I left the house literally 9 times in all of 2022.
Feels good though, doesn't it?
Well, I built this house around what my dream office was.
Uh-huh.
And I only used to get to see it maybe one day a week.
Right.
And what COVID taught me was I really dig being home.
Yeah.
So now I'm a hermit. It's pretty hard to get me to leave the house to teach an event that I can't do through Zoom.
I think a lot of us have been that way. I was the same as you, traveling probably that much or maybe more. And COVID's like, you know what? I like being here. My house is kind of cool. And not getting on a plane is really pleasant.
Not being in airports and hotel rooms. And it doesn't matter whether it's a 1-star or a 5-star. A bed's a bed, and hotel room food gets old.
Right.
At the end of the day, I go from here to the back porch. I spark up the Kamada Joe. I pour a scotch. That's how I unwind for the day every day of my life.
Right. I'm with you. Okay. I'm going to throw a curveball. I know we didn't talk about this, but hearing some of the things you talked about here, do you have maybe your favorite skip tracing story? Our listeners love to hear like in the trenches kind of stories. Do you have a cool story that involved you having to do some really crazy stuff or get really creative in order to find your skip?
Okay. I've got 2 because war stories are probably the most popular thing.
Yeah.
And us old guys love to sit around and tell war stories. So I have to change the name because in the spaces I deal in, most of the spaces I deal in, pretexting is illegal. So I can't teach pretexting. I can teach elicitation techniques as long as they don't border on pretexting, but most of them do. So like Robin Drake doesn't teach elicitation anymore. I can't teach pretexting. So there's another law called third-party disclosure. So I have to change names when I tell war stories. So there was a guy by the name of Frank Smith that had an automobile financed, and I was asked to locate this guy. And even going all the way back then, I understood how important it is to find out who someone was before I even had any of these grand theories.
So is this early days of skip tracing?
Yeah, this goes back to early 90s maybe.
Wow. Okay. So we're going back in time here.
Yeah. So I found out that this guy had a real affinity and a passion and almost a hobby for horse racing, but not the normal kind, the buggy kind, where they sit in the buggy behind the horse with the little whip, right? Well, there was only one place in all of South Florida that did that, and it was Flagler Racetrack. So every day for weeks and weeks, I'd go by Flagler Racetrack multiple times a day trying to spot this car. And one day I actually found it, and there was 4 or 5 guys leaning up against it, long dreadlocks, and the guy had a name like Franklin Smith, let's say. You would never know in a million years that he was of Jamaican descent, but the minute you saw these guys, you knew they were, because they're all leaning up against the car I wanted, and it was like a Cheech and Chong concert around the car, and I'll leave it at that, right? So I was a power lifter back then. I was young. I was 10 foot tall and bulletproof. I probably never do this today. I had a key to the car because, the bank had the key. I just walked up to it and started putting the key in, and they're like, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm repossessing the car." They said, "You can't have that car. That's Pinky's car." I said, "No, this belongs to the bank." And they started arguing with me, and you couldn't do this today because the second that happened, it'd be known as what's called a breach of peace, and you got to walk away. So the arguing back and forth, none of that would happen. So within a couple seconds of the initial argument with these guys happening, this long Cadillac back when they were solid steel and they were land yachts pulls up, and this tiny guy gets out, and he's the debtor, the customer. And he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm taking the car." He said, "You can't have the car. That's Pinky's car." And I'm like, "Well, I don't know who Pinky is, but look, we can do this the hard way or the easy way. The choice is up to yours." I reached out and put my hand on his shoulder and went to move him out of the way. And within seconds, I had a MAC-10 machine pistol put on my forehead and said, "I told you you can't have the car. It's Pinky's." And I looked at him and I said, "You know what, sir? You're absolutely right. Should you ever have the need for an extra key, let me give you the one I have."
That's not how I'm expecting that one to end.
It was about, I don't think that car was ever got. And then another one in the 80s and early 90s.
That's not how I expected that story to go, Alex.
Yeah, most people don't, because there was not a victory at the end of that road.
Yeah. But that was probably the smartest play you could have made. This is why you're still here right now telling that story.
Yeah, this other cat, which is far more interesting, and there was a victory. This guy was a con man. It was a fraud. His first and last name were the same, and it was a Greek name, and I can't think of one off the top of my head, so I'll just say his name was Michael
Demetrios.
There you go. Demetrios was his name. Now, this guy had skills, and it was in Central Florida, large Greek community, and he had a Mitsubishi 3000, which back then was like a $50,000 car, which was big money.
Yeah.
And he had a kids modeling business, and he would convince moms that their kid was the next big thing, and he'd bilk them for a bunch of money. And this guy was doing things with photos, putting him in the same photo with celebrities before there was Photoshop or anything.
Wow.
That made him even more credible. Well, he actually conned a major political figure in the local area out of $50,000 because he wanted to start a leather goods business. And he took the car and $50,000 worth of leather. He went to Mexico. He had a custom crate built, and he shipped the car all the way back to Greece. And their laws are different over there. They didn't recognize the title. So I tracked him from South Florida to California, knew the car was shipped to Greece. I'd have to go into the office to use the Watts line because it was free every morning, like at 4 a.m. because of the time difference to make calls. Because if you wanted to repo a car, the police had to go out and you had to pay a fee. And if the guy that had the car had more of a fee than you did, he kept the car. So it was a little bit of a racket. But this guy for months would send me postcards with him laying on the hood of the car.
Oh, my.
Because he knew I was hunting him.
Yeah.
Now, I've had the gypsy world send me frogs with their mouths sewn shut with a rock in it, which is a curse where you can't talk, which obviously that didn't work. I had bullets with my initials sent to me by fraud ring, all kinds of stuff. But that guy, I finally tracked him down after months and months and months. It's probably a case I've worked the longest of anybody. And he had more money than what we gave the police, so he kept the car. So I actually had to hire a team out of Germany to get into Greece, get the car out of Greece before law enforcement caught him, because then it would have been grand theft. So it was like a James Bond thing where I was hiring a mercenary team to go in and get it and get out. And that one, we did get the collateral. So that one's a victory.
So tell me, you kept those postcards. You have those still?
No, I wish I did.
Oh, man, because what a great story. Like for your memoirs or something. That'd be such a great story.
Yeah, some of the stuff like, the bullets or any number of things. I mean, I repossessed 2 members of the Cocaine Cowboys who documentaries have been done on. They're the guys that had the live shootout in Miami Beach with the FBI, where several were killed. I repossessed two of those guys, and when they showed up on the news because of the shooting that day, and they put their picture up, it was like, wow, I've been to both those guys' houses multiple times. And there have been a couple skips that appeared in the early days of America's Most Wanted that I'd call America's Most Wanted and say, hey, you just sent all this info. Well, I just repoed this guy's car, or he was just in jail in a different state, different name, different crime. So again, I've done celebrities, rock stars, athletes, you name it.
I mean, that's kind of cool. You got to help, maybe catch a real bad criminal by giving over some info. That's kind of a...
Well, here's the thing that people don't realize. And and I put this in both my front door and your front door. If penetration testers and social engineers and Skiptracers didn't exist, could you imagine how much more phishing would be happening? If it wasn't for people like myself that weren't finding collateral or finding fugitives, think of how many more fugitives would be on the streets, or with the losses a finance company would take, what would happen? Well, they go downstream to a higher interest rate.
Yeah. It would be like real life Gotham is what it would be.
Yeah. Skiptracers play a real life difference maker in both those industries.
So, Alex, as we come near the end, let me ask you a few questions. Most of us with any success in a career didn't get there with no help. We've had a mentor or two along the way. Who would you say are some of your greatest mentors through your career as you came up to be the SkipGuru?
Wow, such a great question. If you look at Alex Price, what you look every day at is the sum total of the people at different stages of my life that have been mentors or teachers. So early in my life, it would have been Coach Ed Whipple and a drill sergeant by the name of Sergeant Sammons. When I got into the professional world, there were four men that to this day, I don't know why, but I love throwing their names out. He's no longer with us, but he was known as the Godfather, Harvey Altez, Rusty Ansell, Miller Land, and Ron Brown, who pulled me from obscurity of a cubicle and talked me into opening my own company. And those guys called me every day for a solid year with daily advice on how to run a business. And had it not been for them, there'd be no SkipGuru. And now here I am, 60 years old. And at 60 years old, some unbelievable mentors have entered my life, such as yourself,
Thank you.
such as Robin Dreek, and Yoda himself, Mr. Dove Barron. And it's funny with a lot of the theories and stuff. I used to talk a lot about vibes, and I love a saying that my vibe affects my tribe. And you changed how I look at everything on how important empathy is and being non-judgmental. The first day of the Human Hacker event, it might have been like the first sentence out of your mouth was, make them better for having met you. And that just blew my mind. And it really made me think. But as I have become friends with Robin and other people, I was doing a lot of the stuff of human behavior. I just didn't know I was doing it. So now I can put psychological names to it. Dr. Paul Ekman. I didn't know what a nonverbal was, but I knew this cat gave me a bad vibe because his smile was just off. I had no idea that there was such a thing as a Duchenne smile or any of that. So you and Robin and people like Chase Hughes and Scott Rouse, Greg Hartley, others have been a vision quest over the past several years that have taken what I do to new levels, and the classes I teach, other people have never heard of it before. So I have to tip my hat and say thank you. And you said it at the beginning, one of the most important things I do in life is my work with the ILF. It has been a career highlight. And anybody out there, whether you're a pen tester, a social engineer, a Skiptracer, you would be surprised as little as $25 can help save a kid's life.
Yeah.
So get involved, help the ILF out, complete its next mission.
Thank you, Alex. And thanks for that awesome list. And what a great and validating list that is. Now, when I ask this question, we have a lot of people who love to read that listen to the podcast. It doesn't have to be a book about skip tracing or social engineering. It can be something you just read recently that you think, wow, this is awesome. Everyone should read this. Do you have some favorite books that you love to recommend?
Yeah, and let me digress back. I have to mention the godfather of what you and I do, and that's Joe Navarro, who was one of the first guys I met that I even learned what body language was.
Yeah.
And then Frank Schaefer, who 2 months ago I spoke at a conference you and I had dinner at, and that day I had to follow him with a class, and we talk about nerve-wracking.
Yeah, I wouldn't want that either.
Yeah, luckily I knew he was going to be there, so I taught a completely different topic.
Yeah.
So, but I have a real different way of consuming information. I love to read, but because of the way there was so much travel, I do everything via an audiobook first.
Sure.
Because I learn better when I listen. And it was difficult being in airports and gate to gate, holding the book in front of you like this and reading it as you're walking.
Right.
So I listen to a book first, and if the book captures my attention and I really dig it and I need to drill down more, then I'll get the actual book. And that's when I start highlighting, dog-earing, etc.
Yeah,
my wife got me a Kindle, and I've got a ton of books on the Kindle, but for my most prized books, my signed editions, my first editions, there's still nothing better than breaking open that paper, that spine breaking and the smell and the feel. So because I learn better listening, most of the books I listen to are nonfiction, but to cleanse the palate, after I read a nonfiction, like I got done with Gavin Stone's book, How to Tell If Someone's Lying, which I really dug. To cleanse the palate in between, I'm a major history buff of several different eras. And right now reading a book by Mary Dorcia Russell called Doc. And it's about Doc Holliday. And Doc Holliday is one of my favorite historical people, and many people, the movies really don't do. Doc Holliday wore a derby. So did Butch Cassidy, so did Bat Masterson, so did the Sundance Kid. So that's where I switched from the open road Stetson to the derby, because my mentor, Harvey Altez, said, always have something that people remember you by, that they can say, go look for the guy in the hat. Well, cowboy hats are everywhere. You do not see many of these bad boys.
Nope.
So, and then on deck is by far my single favorite historical person, Winston Churchill. There's a book called Churchill by Andrew Roberts, and this is a 60-hour audiobook, which beats even Harry Potter or Game of Thrones. But the reason why he's the first author that they gave access to Winston Churchill's personal diaries, and the royal family gave this same guy access to the king's diary during the time he served as prime minister. So he got stuff that nobody else in history's ever gotten. So that's on deck next to read once I'm done with.
I love it. 60 hours though.
It's going to be a long read.
Yeah. So, Alex, if people want to learn more about you, follow you, see what training or things are coming up in your life, what's the best way for them to do that?
One is LinkedIn. You can find me at Alex SkipGuru Price. I have a private Facebook group that you're part of that's nothing but investigators, pen testers, called SkipGuru's Tribe, and that's apostrophe S and SkipGurus on Facebook. It's a private group. There's no memes, political speech, nothing. It's content driven only. And then LocateSmarter, which is a online data provider that I'm the director of training and development of. People can always reach me at alex.price@locatesmarter.com. And anybody in your audience that has a need for any public record data, if they call me and mention your show, I'll give them 7 days free on it.
Nice. Okay. Well, we'll put all those links in the show notes so people will connect with you. And a lot of guests always tell me afterwards they get pinged, and you'll probably see some growth in your tribe. It's a really great group, by the way.
It's funny. This podcast world is so new to me. It's a post-pandemic thing. And I've done, towards the latter part of last year and this year, I've probably done 50 of them. And I've just had a blast because I'm not trying to hawk a book or something. So it's just cool conversations with people. And there's no such thing as a wasted good conversation with somebody.
I'm with you there. Alex, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show, sharing your experience with us, sharing some of those war stories, especially that first one. Did not expect that. It was really great to have you in, and look forward to talking to you again.
Hey, I'll end like I do anything I do. Everybody be blessed, be safe, and happy hunting.
And thank you, everyone, for joining Alex and I today in our conversation. Join me again next month. We'll have another really fascinating guest on the Human Element series. Till then, see ya.